Hello and welcome to the Neurodivergent Social Work Voices campaign. I am Florence Smith, the Neurodivergent social worker and your host. If you've stopped in to listen, there must be a reason why. Maybe it's to listen to and learn from the first-hand experiences of neurodivergent, or as I like to call us, neurosparkly social workers, on how you can create a neuro-inclusive workplace. Or maybe you're seeking advice from other neurodivergent social workers about what works for them. Whatever your reason, it's nice to have you here, because for 1 month we will hear from 19 neurosparkly social workers. The conversations will explore 19 journeys, 19 unique neurological profiles, and 19 tips for other neurosparkly social workers. So, why has this campaign been launched? Well, it's been done with the vision to raise awareness, share knowledge, celebrate neurodivergence, as well as increase representation of neurosparkly social workers across the profession. You can find us everywhere from students, social work assistants, frontline professionals, educators, and managers. Today I'm talking with Vinice, a social worker with dyslexia, dyspraxia and ADHD. Firstly, Vinice, please could you tell me a little bit about your current role in social work?
So my current role is a really odd but interesting one at the moment. So my official title is Child Protection Subject Matter Expert, which is quite a fancy title. And what I am doing at the moment is for a local authority, and I am on not a released program yet. So I'm trying to figure out how to say this without telling you really what I'm doing. We are looking into how to reform and improve our children's social care system. All that I can say.
That sounds really, really interesting. It sounds really top secret as well. So as much as I want to ask questions, I'm going to take that firm boundary that you've popped in place, respect it and step away.
Really, I'd love to tell you, but I can't.
That's absolutely fine. One question I will ask then, what kind of roles have you had in social work?
So I came a bit backwards and I was a career changer into social work. So I started out in the banking, I was an investment banker before I changed into social work in my mid-20s. I had that whole, I want to do something more meaningful with my life.
Yeah.
And I went off and did my social work degree. And I started backwards. When I was waiting for my degree to get my qualification, at that time between finishing your degree and then getting your actual HC, with HCPC back then, registration, I worked as a personal advisor. So that was working with children that are living care, and I worked my way backwards in. So I did personal advisor, and then I got my registration came through, and then I worked for children. It was child protection and looked after children aged 12 plus. And I've gone trickled down, and then I worked with, it's always been child protection, child in need, and looked after children 0 to, I think within 0 to 12 teams. I've worked as a consultant social worker for Frontline, which was looking over their frontline. What are they called? They're frontliners. What do we call our frontliners? Just frontline trainees, I think. And then what have I been? I've been a team manager in early help services in social care. I have been a child protection social worker, but that's been my main, I suppose the bulk of my career has been being a child protection social worker, then going into management, and now in this very highly specialised secret role.
Well, you can see where the expert comes in with your wealth of experience as well, can't you? It fits quite well. Thank you so much for sharing. What is your neurodivergence and how does your brain sparkle?
So I have dyslexia, dyspraxia and ADHD, and my brain is a cacophony of many things, but all the time. So I suppose mine mainly manifests itself in my way that I structure everything. So my thought structure, I think one of the things that I pride myself on is my ability to conceptualize, find patterns and deliver faster than anybody else. So I can be sitting in a meeting, we'll start talking about something, be it, oh, how are we going to do this piece of work? And by the time somebody's got round to saying who wants to put their hand up to join this, and we haven't even got off the planning phase, I have planned it, I structured it. I've run through the pros, the cons, how we would fix the cons, weighing up if this is something that's going to be beneficial for us or not, where our pitfalls are going to be, and then gone all the way to evaluation, like implementation and evaluation before we've even got off the ground. And then I'm like, well, I've worked through all of this. This is how we should get started. This is what we should do. And it's a great thing when I am in the driving seat for something, but it's also a frustrating thing when I am not, because I'm bored.
Mm-hmm.
By the time we are going on a project, I'm like, well, I've done this in my head.
Mm-hmm.
When we get to a pinch point, I'm like, don't want to say I told you so, but I did tell you so, because I managed to foresee this. And sometimes it's quite difficult finding the language or the way to just communicate that I know this and I know that this is going to happen. Because sometimes I don't really know why I know that it's going to happen like that. I think that I may have picked up random bits of information and insight without knowing, but I know it.
Yeah.
That's not going to work because it's not, and I can't really give you the full explanation as to why. And so it benefits me in that way, but it's also a drawback in the same sense. But I'm trying to work through those bits of drawbacks. I am quick on everything. I'm quick off the mark to do everything, to figure out things. I'm quick to engage with people. So when I was working face-to-face with families, which I don't do at the moment anymore, I found when neurodiverse was one of my fantastic ways of engaging with teenagers. I loved working with everyone. Just like, oh, this case, because that was the terminology we used to use. Like, this case is really difficult. Give it to Vinice. And I'd be like, absolutely. And I'd love it. I did youth work alongside my social work when I was working as a social worker as well. And I loved it. I loved working with what we would deem as troubled families because I got them and I understood, I suppose, their chaotic, their nature. People would go in and they would try to be like very linear with how they were approaching the family and problems and issues that were going on. And I'd embrace all of the different fires that were going on at the same time and have the ability to look at them all and find ways of the family to move through them all, which I think is something that when you're not neurodiverse can be quite a struggle to do, holding all of these different issues in your brain and managing to work them all at the same time.
Yeah, I always think of it as spinning plates. I often think I have lots of spinning plates around me that if someone could see them, they'd think, what on earth is going on in her world? And I love how you've kind of described your strengths as well, because to me, as a fellow dyslexic social worker, I've heard so many dyslexic strengths in there in terms of kind of finding patterns, being a problem solver, running scenarios, but also it's like insight-based knowledge. So subconsciously knowing an answer because actually through our own lived experiences or observations of something, we can put that learning into kind of our current context or current situation.
It's a big one, information holding. Like I can hold a lot of information in my head, but I can't tell you the detail of it. Like the concept of something, absolutely. I get it, I understand it. I can't tell you, I couldn't tell you dates for anything. I couldn't tell you who was the person that gave me this theory. Oh my gosh, when I was training and they'd ask me in supervision, like when I was doing my ASW, like who was the theorist about it? I used to get so nervous about having to say, you know, this is a theory that I'm using here and this is the person that coined it. I could not tell you. I can tell you why it's working, how it's working, what I'm doing. I can't tell you the other stuff behind it because I haven't retained it.
Yeah.
So I think that's still, I think, an issue with bits and pieces that I do, because along social work, I also sit on the Family Justice Council. I don't know if you know those, but I sit on their panel and we'll go into meetings and, you know, they're barristers and lawyers and it's the president of the family division and they're all very, very good with their dates and there is, and I'm like, and sometimes it's a very big barrier of trying to get my point across or trying to get the amount that I know across without having so many written prompts around to make sure that I'm delivering the information in the way that other people need to receive it, because other people don't have the ability to meet me where I'm at, and that is a big one.
Yeah, and whether it's kind of the knowledge, skills or understanding to meet you, or willingness as well to meet you where you're at, because I wonder when I hear about kind of trying to get across information without written notes, when I try and do that, it's often because I'm trying to kind of camouflage or mask and trying to like fit in, them not think, oh, okay, here's the imposter with all of the notes that she's holding on to for dear life. And sometimes that can be well, not sometimes, it most definitely is really, really draining. And I can often find if I lean too much into that and don't catch myself, it can sometimes spin a negative internal self-talk, because if I fail at being able to deliver a date or a name without a written prompt, then comes in kind of teenage Florence, like, oh, you're so silly, you're so stupid, why couldn't you do it?
You should be able to.
Yeah, look at that person who did it so easily.
Absolutely. I think it was a bit when I was a younger social worker, that used to be more impactful than it is now. But actually, no, now I'm thinking about it, I actually don't think it is. I think it's more impactful now that I am in areas where I deem to be like, you should be such a professional because you have this job title, you do this work, you sit on these boards, you do these things. Why do you need to have things written down? Why do you need to prompt yourself? Why do you know? But really, I think when I was starting out, it was a bit weird. People would be like, what are you doing? And then it was all like, oh, but she's learning. It's fine. And now it seems like, well, you have learned. You've been in this job for 10 years, over 10 years in these roles. You shouldn't need this anymore. There doesn't seem to be a consideration for neurodiversity in older people. I say older people, I'm nearly 40, I'm not that old, but they're kind of like, oh, you should have grown out of it by now. You're not learning. Why do you not have the ability to deliver how we deliver?
And I guess
as managers.
And like you said, as leaders and as managers in certain positions, are there expectations from like us as practitioners to want, need, or expect you to know things and record it off the top of your head, but also from the people who are managing you, for example, as well, that expectation there too. And I know that this is a wider conversation that's being led by a fantastic neurodivergent social worker who will be part of our conversations, but around professionalism and the professional capabilities framework with PCF1. And actually, kind of, if we were to look at that through a neuro-inclusive lens, is having notes and prompts a good way to show professionalism to make sure that we are prepared?
I think that is a big one. So before I knew that I had ADHD, and I say before I knew, it was in my educational psychologist thing she kind of put at the end. And scores high, for ADHD traits, I never kind of paid any attention. I was like, great, Dyslexic, Dyspraxic, thank you. That's what I need to get my university adaptations and didn't need the rest of it. When I started working, I got an iPad mini. So instead of getting your book allowance that you got for your ASYE year, I was like, I'm never going to read a book. I want to spend this money on something that is going to benefit me when I'm out with families. Give me an iPad mini. Just spend my money on that, and it's great. And I'd always go to Plandas and say, I'm really sorry, but I need to read our last set of notes, and I'd have them there on my person to understand where they were at, for me to remember where we were at, for me to be able to say to look, I can't tell you any information unless I read it. I've got to go and find this now, because I don't have it in my head like that, or I don't have all of the information in my head like that. And that was very well received, actually. And I always felt more confident and in control. So I think that is also what came across with families and young people.
Yeah, well, it's professionalism, it's accountability as well, isn't it? It's being accountable to your practice and making sure that actually you do, if you're asked a question by a family, you are making sure that actually I'm giving you the correct information from what we have. So thank you so much for sharing. Going on to question 2, please could you tell me a little bit about your experience of social work? So this could be, anywhere on your 10-year journey.
It's been an interesting ride. So I've worked in local authorities. That's the only thing I've ever done. So my journey has been within local authority social care. It's throughout a few authorities, not too many. How many have I worked in? 3? I think only 3. So it's been fast paced. At times it's been absolutely exhausting. I think in the early start of my career, when I was trying to do everything and not giving myself any leeway, but just giving myself what I needed I found myself burnt out I think I was 18 months into my social work career. And I think I remember crying in a meeting room on the phone to a GP saying, I just can't manage this. I just can't do this. And it wasn't like I couldn't manage the work. It's just that I was trying to remember all the stuff, and I was trying to get to everything really quickly. And I was trying to do things to a standard that I didn't need to do. My work was fantastic, but I was holding myself to, I've got to be better than the normal or the average because I'm an imposter. I still had that big you're going to get found out that you need all of this support and help. So you better make sure that you are high flying. And I always have been in my career and in my education because of that whole, someone's going to find you out, so you better cover for it.
Yeah.
So it's really been quite difficult. I remember being in a meeting and a manager, I had doodle, and here I've got like a fidget pen, and before fidget pens were a thing, actually, I used to doodle in team meetings, and everyone would be like, "Oh, what are you drawing today?" And I'd sit there, and anything longer than half an hour, I was like, "I don't have the attention span for that." And I
Yeah.
doodle. People were like, "Are you paying attention?" And they'd be like, "Why does she get to doodle in meetings? Or why does?" And I'd be like, "Oh, just because I need to." Manager going, "Her brain works differently. Leave her." And I was like, and I didn't even know my brain was working that differently. I was just thinking dyslexia or dyspraxia at the time. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what differently, but like whatever. But she was like, she knew that I had ADHD. Like she was like, "You're a bit different, aren't you?" It was just like her brain works differently. Leave her alone. And after that bit of understanding, I was like, my brain does work differently. Yeah, leave me alone. And then I just started to do what I needed to do to make my world spin. And it worked for families and young people. It didn't work for my teams that I was in. So I was found that I was very, like families, I'd always get great feedback. All my families that do, not all of them would do really well because, hey, I'm not the magician there. It's families and their circumstance and what's going on for them. But I'd, would do very well with what we were doing on our stuff. But teams would always be like, why does she never want to cover duty? Why is she always allowed to go and do, like I'd travel to Wales to see families and stuff, and I'd get all the families that were away, and I just think my manager was trying to just get me out of the office and giving me families that were here, there and everywhere, so I would have that time to travel and give my brain a bit of a reprieve.
Yeah.
And I always felt different in that respect. I found team working really hard because people didn't work to my pace either. And so I was like, well, I don't want to come on a visit with you because I'm not going to do this how you want to do it, and you're not going to do it how I want to do it. It's going to be really awkward. I'm going to get bored, and you're going to think my style of interaction is really strange. And yeah, so I used to be very much an out on my own type social worker, which not always the best in family teams and in child protection teams because we had to work as a team, and I found that a struggle.
Yeah.
And even so, going into management was it was odd. So it was an edge of care service team. So all my staff worked in twos, and we did therapeutic input using solution-focused brief therapy with families that were on the edge of care or custody. So it's a very interesting and different role to be in. So we had the luxury and the time of going out to families when they wanted us to. It wasn't driven by child protection. We had no statutory markers because they were still held within child protection or child in need teams. We were like the therapeutic social workers that came and did the good stuff. Beautiful. And it happened during COVID. So I started my role and then COVID kicked in and we were all locked down. But being a manager was really, really hard. And actually, I don't like it because I like to do what I need to do and we'll get everything done. So it's very good at taking directions from my service manager or my director and getting that done. But having to be there constantly for team members and staff members, I found challenging. Found it really challenging also because I had a staff member who was also neurodivergent in my team. We have the same neurodivergent. So that was weird, just weird, because even though we had the same diagnosis, she worked completely different to me and was more needing of some hand holding and support than I've ever been. And I didn't know how to give her that support, even though we'd talk about it and I'd say, what do you need from me? And she'd say this, and I'd try and deliver it. I always felt a bit uneasy with it. Because I've never really reflected fully on why or how to come across. She was like, you should be a mentor, you're great, this is great for me. But I always felt very, very uncomfortable in that position. And I felt very uncomfortable having to be pushed and pulled into situations with people that as a social worker, I'd have just been like, I'm not engaging in that.
Yeah.
And then you have to engage in it. And also feeling a bit too much empathy for the team. They're having that separation of, I'm your manager and this is what I'm saying and this is what we're doing. Some people find that very easy. I didn't. I found it very difficult. So yeah, being a manager was not my favourite, and I don't think I'd ever go back to doing it.
That's quite interesting to hear, and thank you for sharing as well. Because I mean, the further up the ladder we go of social work, the representation almost gets a little bit thinner. And I know that I speak from my local area.
Quite difficult. I found it very difficult. And when I've had to when I was managing frontline teams, I think it's a lot of, I am sensorily, m- more sensorily impacted than I thought I ever was.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I feel like I'm being crowded by people and things, and that whole, you must be, as a manager, you must be in the office. Like, you must be in these places at all the time, doing all these things. I find that is very difficult. And as a manager, there's no leeway to say, actually, I can't be in the office all the time because I don't like bright lights and all the noise I can't deal with. I have to be able to just go and do something else and come back. I can't do that as a manager in an office because someone's going to follow me. There's nowhere to go. Where my base was at work, like, we were basically in an industrial estate. There's nothing around. I can't even go for a walk anywhere. There's nothing to go
Oh.
to. There's nothing to do. So that, I found that very, very difficult. And at the moment I've got a lovely manager. I manage myself. Like, I only honestly love it because she barely knows where I am and what I'm doing. All my work gets done, still high standard.
Yeah.
I have the autonomy just to go and do it. She'll check in and be like, "You're right." I'm like, absolutely fine. I will. What do you need from me? I'll get it done. When do you need it by? Give me a deadline.
Oh, love a deadline.
Love it. If you don't give me a deadline, it's never getting done. And also with management, that was another thing. My service manager would give me like the yearly things, like the fine hour kind of, our stats had to be in at certain times. And, you've got to do your finance for your team. But then everything else never had a deadline. So the work with families did, of course, we couldn't go further than 12 sessions, and those things had deadlines. But it wasn't like in child protection where I had conference deadlines, I've got visit deadlines.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why I worked very, very well in a frontline team, because I had strict deadlines. I need to see you every 5 working days. I need to, I need to do all these bits and pieces. And then as a manager, I need to set those for people. And I'm like, oh, actually, I find this quite hard because if I'm setting these for you, they're not really set for me. So I feel like they're not urgent, like I don't have to do them. Or where this seems therapeutic, we're not responsible for your statutory outcomes or your statutory markers. So actually, our work doesn't need to be done. It does need to be done, but I'm like, it doesn't have a timescale on it. So I don't feel that this is really important.
Doesn't put the urgency on it, does it? With that kind of impending or impeding timescale that's kind of coming at you and coming at you fast.
That's it. No one's going to shout at me if there's 3 or 4 weeks between your visits. But they would if you were a child protection social worker. I'd have to be on you to be like, you're out of time scale. Why should this visit being done? In our team, it's like, okay, sessions are still ongoing. The family have counselled 4 times in a row, but they still want to see us, so we'll see them in 4 weeks' time. And I was like, oh, okay. Just felt a bit too woolly.
Yeah. Isn't that kind of structure? And maybe structure's wrong, because having worked in a child protection team, there was almost a routine to it, I think, because of patterns. Yeah. You can pattern your work, you can pattern your diary. And my ears kind of pricked up when you mentioned duty, because that's one of the things I also really struggled with was duty, because I'm someone who likes predictability. If I have a plan for a day, I like it to stay that way. I have kind of flexible planning where things can be moved, but say, for example, I've got a deadline and I've put in my diary, I'm doing a report that day. I can be really kind of thrown off and become quite overwhelmed or just like really buzzy inside if suddenly, okay, I have to not do 3 hours of that and work on something else because something urgent's come in, for example.
Absolutely, I'm like that.
And it can almost
become to get back into the flow of something. It's like, oh, my head wasn't there, and then you asked me to do this, and I've got to really reformulate my whole brain to get into doing something, especially written work in the first place. I'm like, you've got to make me sit down and write this in the first place. I need to not be here. Like, I need to not be in the office. I need to be somewhere that I know that I can just do this. So do not tell me to do anything else.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to move on to question 3, which is, what advice would you give to other neurosparkly social workers?
This one, I'm not sure if it's going to be quite controversial or not. Only divulge if you need to. So not every workplace is accommodating or understanding. I still got, and this was only a year and a half ago, I still got, oh, but you grow out of ADHD. Well, you can cure ADHD. So my cousin had ADHD when he was a kid and he doesn't have it now. And I was like, well, he probably still does have ADHD. Yeah, just got all of his factors that he's been able to manage himself with. He's containing himself and managing. It doesn't go away. It's not like I've got some curable disease that goes away. This is how my brain is wired. So there's still, and I found that very shocking. It's from other social workers. I'm like, that's still the thinking. So I would only divulge if you feel that you need to be supported. If you can't find a way for your manager confidentially to support you, or for you to support yourself, or unless you need access to work to chime in to give you any good stuff like coaching or equipment or whatever, I wouldn't. And I know that's very negative viewpoint, and that we shouldn't really be thinking like that, because ideally we should be able to go into any workplace and say, hey, this is me, this is what I need, this is how I function well, and it be accommodated. I think going in and saying, this is how I function well, doing these things, but not saying I am, something like the label, is more beneficial, because I suppose just because I've seen it not go very well, you said the label, because then people switch off because they hear the label and they think about, I don't know, maybe the naughty boy, the naughty kid they have to deal with once. And like, but you're not that, or are you that? How can you? You're stupid. You're like, I'm not stupid. It's got nothing to do with my intellectual capability or capacity. I can just see it differently. I did, this is a tangent, but I did a great thing once with my team. Who, this is the therapeutic team, who had people in that team who didn't think ADHD was a thing. And so I love a puzzle, and I got the GCHQ book of puzzles. So which is because MI5 and GCHQ, they employ neurodiverse people because of the way that we think. So I got this book of puzzles, and I brought it into a big team meeting that I was having. I was like, let's start with a puzzle. Let's just get, instead of an icebreaker, let's do this. And the other neurodiverse social worker, she got every single question correct. Nobody else did. And one of the people in that team, who thought she was stupid because of how she had to structure herself, and because she was quite chaotic in her presentation and how she managed herself and her life, he really had a disdain for it. Just thought, well, she can't manage, she can't do it. She got every single question correct. And I remember looking at her and going, how did you get that? Did you see the answers beforehand? She was like, no. And she told him how she was working out the patterns in these puzzles. And the look on his face was a picture. And I did that on purpose, because I knew she'd bloody get them. I wanted to be like, neurodiversity isn't a bad thing. This is what we can do. Shouldn't have to do that. It's like a party trick. It shouldn't have to be done to be respected as a colleague and respected as a person. So that's my kind of bit. Like, I don't think I would divulge unless I had to. Well, people maybe should pull out a party trick like that, so that you're actually on a better footing, and then say, yeah, I can do this because of my ADHD, or because I'm neurodiverse. Put on my signature at work, dyslexic, confidently dyslexic, excuse typos, goes on the bottom of my email signature. I only did that a couple of weeks ago because I felt in the position within my career and being established in a certain level of power that I was able to. I wouldn't have done it as a newly qualified social worker, wouldn't have done it on my way up the ladder. I feel okay to do it now because I'm quite established. I'm like, yeah, I can do this, and I can say, and hopefully this makes people think a bit differently, that she can do that. Maybe other ones can.
Well, thank you for breaking that, because I would absolutely love to see a social worker kind of higher up in the ranks to have that in their emails as well. I currently work in the voluntary sector, but have the hashtag made by dyslexia in my email signature, and it does feel vulnerable when you first do it, because of the misconception that dyslexia impacts our intelligence, just like your work colleague did. And just because of the kind of myths and misconceptions that are still floating about today, and so prominently.
Looking at social work and the conversations that we have, and being inclusive for me means looking at psychologically and safe environments for all. So when you're in team meetings, and I remember being in panel meetings, and they're talking about children, and like, oh, that one's got ADHD, and it being able to separate what people are thinking and saying from what's actually happening, to make it a safe environment for all to be able to share. Yes, we all should be able to question, and we all should be able to, question people and ask questions, but we shouldn't be like, oh, that is because you are, or that is because that label. It should be, I'm curious, let me know more, to make it safe for people to talk and explore.
Thank you so much for sharing. Vinice, thank you for giving your time to celebrate neurodivergence in social work, and for sharing your lived experiences. And thank you to everyone who has listened. If you're interested in learning more about neurodivergent social workers and neuroinclusion, please check out the Neurodivergent Social Worker website and the British Association of Social Workers Special Interest Group. Thank you.
Thank you.